Hello, I'm Russell Poynton from Edison Group. Today it's great to have Richard Hutton, the CFO of Greggs, back with us. Richard, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Richard, why don't we start off? So a few years ago at the CMD, we had this, the 5-year strategy with the revenue growth targets, and obviously part of that was the space expansion. So I appreciate we've still got 2 years to go on that growth strategy, so probably getting a bit ahead of ourselves. But I wonder if you could just talk a bit about life after that 5-year growth strategy, and why you think there's so much growth potential left for Greggs from a space perspective.
Sure. It's you're right. Space growth has been half of the story we outlined then, and that's been very successful. We've been increasing our representation in areas we've not been in previously. So if you look at what's changed in the last 4 or 5 years, generally what we've been doing is relocating shops in the traditional areas you would have expected a baker, high streets in towns, cities, suburbs, and then opening in new spaces like roadsides, supermarkets, retail parks, transport locations where we're very much underrepresented. And that will be the story going forward as well. So when you actually look at the level of penetration, there's a huge amount to go at still. And so we'll be pushing ahead, and we're building capacity for, in the next phase of investment, 3,500 shops from, having lapped 2,600 at the end of 2024.
And going back to last year, digital was also, provided good growth for you last year. So could you just talk about what you're seeing from a digital perspective, from in terms of customer behavior, and how your CRM is evolving?
Yeah. Digital for us is a mixture of interacting with customers who want delivery. Is one aspect of that. So we extended over the last year our availability on delivery platforms from just being on Just Eat to now be on Just Eat and Uber Eats. So we've gone through a kind of a structural step up in terms of the way customers interact with the business that way. But for the walk-in customer, we've also been encouraging them to adopt the Greggs app, which is our loyalty program. And that sets us up then for a CRM approach to talking to them. So last year we had 20% of our transactions were scanned using the Greggs app. That compares with 12.5% the year before, so a rapid increase, but still quite underpenetrated again. I mean, evidence from other retailers is you can get to a much higher level than that. And by doing that, we get to understand customers' behavior in more detail. We can spot the things that they are missing and hopefully give them little nudges and encouragement to take advantage of the things that they're missing at Greggs. And we think that's going to be a win-win, but it's really important, I think, channel for the future.
And let's move on to something that perhaps people don't see so much, which is the infrastructure behind the storefront. And so we're now in the middle of the peak capital investment years, which you've been talking about for a few years, but we're now here. So could you just talk about what's happening? Talk about Derby, Kettering, and the benefits to Greggs over the long term. And in the results, you did talk about a bit of margin dilution as that capacity comes on in the next couple of years.
Yeah, certainly in the short term, that will be there'll be an element of step up in our costs, which you would expect if we're opening 2 big new sites within our vertically integrated supply chain. Just to explain what they do, so we had a clear opportunity to open more shops. The question was how to create the capacity in the supply chain to do it. There were various options, but in the end we landed on the most effective one, was to use our existing regional distribution centres, but give them the ability to reach more shops. So what we're doing is we're pulling some of the picking for our shops upstream into 2 dedicated warehouses where we'll be able to invest in automation because we'll have the volumes to be able to do it. So one in Derby is a combination of a frozen storage and distribution centre with robotic picking. It will also have some space for manufacturing so that we've got white space that we can lay down in the future additional production lines for our key favourite products. And then about a year behind that is the project in Kettering, which is a national distribution centre for chilled and ambient goods. And that will complement Derby that does the frozen stuff, but do the same job. It will do the picking upstream so that then we are pushing out pre-picked loads to our regional distribution centres who will be able to support many more shops because they've got more space, not doing the picking operation at a local level. So I think, it creates capacity. I think strategically also it's a sensible way to go in terms of this ability to automate more, to be less labour dependent. I think in a market which is tight on labour and where the costs of employment are rising, strategically we think that's the right direction.
And before we started filming, you were talking about the new shop around the corner, and it brings us on to the next question in terms of there's a lot going on in a Greggs store now that there wasn't a couple of years ago, so it's obviously a lot more complex than it used to be. So could you just give some insight into what you think you've done well and perhaps what you've done less well?
Yeah, I mean, you're referring to our beautiful new shop near Chancery Lane's Tube, which is pretty much doubled the size of the unit, and it has enabled us to do many more things. So I was in there just now. The team are producing made-to-order sandwiches. They're producing iced drinks. And the word produce is key because it's one of the ways that we obviously as food-to-go specialists differentiate is by doing things on-site. But you're right, it does bring additional complexity, but it's an important part of the offer. So we were quite sort of careful in putting some of those operations in to get them right before we landed them. And these things will continue to evolve, but being super popular with consumers. So the food is one area of complexity, I guess. Being able to handle delivery in a shop is another form of complexity. Trading longer hours, they're all additional bits of business that the team have to cope with. So at the same time as adding things, we're constantly looking at that shop operation and saying, how can we automate more? How can we bring technologies to bear to take some of the task away so that the team can focus on what the customers really appreciate? So an awful lot goes on. It's a constant journey. I think we're pleased with the progress that we've made in many of those new growth areas that we looked at. We've done well stepping up delivery, and that's important because it will continue to be a growing market. It's one of the fastest growing areas of food to go. So it's important that we're on that journey. We've been extending hours later in the day as well. We're pleased with steady progress in that front. Some people have said, why can't it be faster? But the reality is you're having to change consumers' understanding of when they use Greggs, and that is slowly happening, and I've got a lot of faith that we'll be able to go further on that journey. Perhaps the one area that we've been slightly disappointed about is delivery in the evening. So that bit just hasn't quite resonated yet, and I think our reflection on that is you've probably got to get consumers used to using Greggs later in the day before they start to think of us when they're ordering on delivery, because you don't see the shop, you don't walk past it in the same way. But I think when people get used to the new products and enjoying them, they may well then go on to think of Greggs in the evening on delivery aggregators, and our marketing will help that as well.
Okay, thank you. So we talked a bit more about the long term in the previous questions. So we just focus on kind of here and now. So in the last couple of trading statements, it's revenue's been a bit softer, the volumes, and that I think you're pretty confident it's not Greggs specific, it's just reflective of what's happening on the high street. So could you just talk about what you've seen, the differences by different locations, what's happening in different day parts, please? Yeah.
No, I mean, obviously you've got to ask yourself, is it me or is it the market? That's really important, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Everything we see suggests that this has been a difficult market, really since last summer. In middle of 2024, we saw from July onwards, things did get softer. But everything we see from competitors' information, from market reports, the things that we subscribe to and just read on, it all points in the same direction, which is that the consumers is in a slightly odd place where they're better off, they're in employment, their pay rises are ahead of inflation, and yet they're not confident to spend, and they're saving instead. And I think there's something that's been prevalent through the second half of this year and into the first part of this year about people, and maybe there's a sense of job insecurity because it seems to be younger and less affluent people who are responding to that in that way of saving rather than spending. So I guess there's something in the macro that needs to improve, and we need to all feel slightly more positive and move on. And I'm hopeful with national minimum wage increase coming in April, that will help people to feel they've got even more money in their pockets. And hopefully when we get through, I think some of the things like the fears over implications of national insurance increase, that sort of thing, that people, feel more confident that their job is secure and that they can get back on the front foot and start spending rather than saving.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the dreaded national insurance there, so that's obviously a big cost for you. So more broadly, could you just talk about what you're expecting from a cost perspective this year? Because you're normally pretty proactive in covering the cost inflation that you see.
Yeah, unfortunately, cost inflation hasn't gone away, has it? I mean, that national insurance increase itself is 1% on our cost base, so it's about £20 million of additional cost to Greggs the way it's structured. So it's broadly taking us from, we were expecting about 5% like-for-like cost inflation this year through a mixture of wage awards and some residual food commodity inflation, which is, again, a result of the wage pressures in supply chains. It's probably going to be more like 6% with the national insurance in there as well. We've dealt with more than that in recent years, and we don't like to have to pass it on, but we have done. And what we've seen is that the whole market has done that. So it's been an overall pressure on consumers, of course, but on the flip side, their pay awards are quite healthy as well. So we don't see anybody bucking the market in that sense. Everybody seems to have moved together. As I say, none of us like doing it, but Greggs' value relative to the market has remained very strong. And we can see that in the basket analysis we do, but also in consumers' perceptions of which brands they think are great value. Greggs is at least as strong as it was 3 years ago. By some measures, it's actually stronger in terms of value perception.
Well, Richard, thanks. That's a very good overview of the longer term and the coming year. So good luck with the coming year.
Thank you.